NEPM's podcasts are funded by Armbrook Village Senior Living in Westfield, offering assisted living and compass memory support with evidence-based treatment for those with memory loss. More at armbrookvillage.com.
Welcome to the Fabulous 413. I'm Khalees Smith.
And I'm Monty Belmonte. Later in the show, we'll talk with author Cathy Stanton and the executive director of the Mount Grace Land Trust, Emma Ellsworth, about the intersection of land preservation, the pushback against the industrialization of food, and the celebration of a decade of the food co-op Quabbin Harvest in Orange.
And Mr. Universe Amherst Salman Hamid will tell us about what he's up to in South Africa with the International Astronomical Union and about how ancient lava created tunnels on the moon that they may just make the perfect home for future astronauts.
But we begin talking about music. We usually do live music and music talking on Friday, and we will this Friday and tomorrow as well. But today we're with Kathleen Parks, fiddler, singer, and songwriter with the band Twisted Pine and her duo Kat and Brad. She's playing in Lenox tonight at the Apple Tree Inn, which is a fun, quirky little music spot that I wasn't familiar with, but has a pretty good lineup of people coming to play there.
Indeed.
And we had said that Kathleen was going to be playing live, but Kathleen is like an Olympic athlete. And we do not want to tax her physically too much before her show in Lenox tonight. But you do have a brand new album that comes out this week.
And it's not even quite out yet, so this is extra special. Like, we get to premiere this.
Yeah, this is like our old days on music radio.
I know.
So
living the dreams.
Let's hear the title track of Kathleen Parks' new solo album, Rolling Down the Line.
We're all on a journey, the rails of our lives, and each person is a passenger that aids and abides, and each car is a memory that lands in the ride, and the train keeps rolling down the line. Every car holds one person of our former being, with their pockets pulled out empty and teardrops on their sleeve. But each car holds a window to bring them light, and the train keeps rolling down the line. I keep rocking and I'm holding all the people that I meet. When it's dark in the carriage, sing them softly to sleep. When they wake up in the morning, back to coffee and tea, while the train keeps rolling down the line. People come and it goes for me. You don't mind with the seasons come to change. You stay as long as you'd like, but we've all got a ticket with the date and a time, and the train keeps rolling down the line. Do-do-do-do-do-do. We are all on journey that rails of our lives, and each person is a passenger that aids and abides, and each car is a new memory. That's what makes it right, and the train keeps rolling down the line, and the train keeps us rolling down the line.
That is the title track of Kathleen Parks' brand new album that is due out later this week, Friday?
Yes.
Official release date.
Everywhere Friday.
Congratulations.
Rolling
Thank
down the
you.
line. The last time we saw you, Kathleen, you played at the Green River Festival Live, the Fabulous 413 in the Roundhouse for us.
Yes, in the mad dash to the stage
Yes.
on that very hot summer day.
Right.
That was a good one.
Right before the shelter in place came along, I think right after you were done. You had a great set there, and then you played at the school square dance that Willie Carlisle called.
Oh, yeah.
That was fantastic. My middle son, 17-year-old Enzo, and I were like, should we go? And we went, and we had the best time. And you and the rest of the band were fantastic, following
thank
Willie
you.
Carlisle's square dance lead there.
Yeah, Willie is fantastic. He's so I don't know. He's just such a like bouncy energy and like gets everybody smiling. And that was a really, really fun night to get everyone square dancing. And that was the first time I ever met him too.
Oh, wow.
So it was like immediate like, hello, nice to meet you. Okay, we're gonna play some tunes. All right, let's hop on stage.
And I have to follow your instructions that you're going to be yelling not just to us,
Yeah.
but to a bunch of like 200 dancers.
Yeah,
It's
it
like, and we're
was
following,
really fun.
and we're following different instructions the whole time,
Yeah.
like trying to follow both sets of instructions as he's calling them out live, which is just like, yeah, you guys were awesome doing
Yeah, the power of improv.
it. Kathleen Parks, you play a 5-string violin.
Yes.
How did you come to play that particular instrument? Because I think I've only really seen it done, like I've seen violas with 5 strings, but not violins with 5 strings. And I think I've only ever seen you and Michi Wianko playing them. How did you come to that instrument?
Well, it was actually when I was studying at Berkeley. My teacher, Daryl Anger, who's like the king of 5-string fiddle, he had this instrument and he put it in my hands and was like, I have a great maker from Minneapolis who sent this to me, and if you want to try it out, like, you should give it a whirl. And I was like, okay. And then I never gave it back to him and bought it, and I've been playing it for 10 years, so.
Is the 5th string higher or lower?
Lower. So it's actually the same exact range as a viola and
Hmm.
violin put together.
Nice.
Oh, cool.
So you're not missing any notes.
That's awesome. I didn't realize that you studied with Daryl Anger of like Mr. Sun. We had him on the show
Right.
At Fresh Grass last year doing his Tchaikovsky via Duke Ellington suite, which was
Yes.
fascinating. But how was it studying underneath such a legend in the bluegrass scene?
Oh my gosh. Well, it was incredible because he's such a lovely person, so down to earth that it was really easy to be yourself while working with him. And so your personality, he's very much like, oh, I want, like, what's your personality? Like, let's have that shine through your instrument. And like, ever since I studied with him, I've always been a really big believer of like letting your personality come through your instrument, and like that'll like guide you of what kind of music you're gonna play, like what you know, what you're interested in, and like finding new interests along the way, because as your personality like expands and you learn new things, like so will your playing. So yeah, it was really, really awesome to study with Daryl Anger, and he's still such a dear friend of mine today.
Did you graduate from Berkeley? You had a full ride, I know.
Yes, I did.
So many people go to Berkeley but then drop out. And then that's the mark of very successful musicians
I know.
oftentimes. But I'm glad to hear that you can actually graduate from Berkeley and be a successful musician as well.
Sometimes they go to Berkeley and then are offered teaching positions in the middle of them being at Berkeley as students.
Yeah, that is the case. Yeah, it's a wide open space, Berkeley, you know, like you just don't know. Someone might call you and you might just have to take that gig and, you know, leave and all of a sudden. And man, there's so many people that I know that were only there like maybe even a year or two, and they're doing amazing things now.
Yeah.
And it's like really cool.
It's good to know that you got the full college experience and the full being a touring and professional musician experience. And we're talking with Kathleen Parks, fiddler, singer, songwriter. We had her previously on with the band Twisted Pine. She has a duo called Cat and Brad, and playing solo tonight, although with Dan Bui from Twisted Pine, who be accompanying you tonight and is in our green room right now. Hi, Dan.
Hi, Dad.
Playing at the Apple Tree Inn in Lenox.
But you actually teed up a question that I had about creativity and different projects, like perfectly with your talk about Daryl Anger. Like, how do you feel about this and your solo work and this solo album as opposed to your work with Cat and Brad and the things that you create for Twisted Pine? Like, where does this sit for you creatively?
So the thing about this record, that I think something that is special about this record is that primarily, like more then half of the songs were written on the guitar. Now, in Cat and Brad and in Twisted Pine, I don't play guitar at all. So these songs came from when I was at home, off the road. Didn't write any of them on the road, which I sometimes do a lot with those other projects. But yeah, so this is a little bit more of an introspective album. It's a little bit like the quiet corners of my mind coming out. The song we first heard, Rolling Down the Line, was like really inspired by me taking the Amtrak up and down the East Coast to different gigs because I don't drive. And just like the journey of life itself. Like also I was very inspired by Gordon Lightfoot's writing, and I had the wonderful opportunity to open for him with my duo Cat and Brad and like get to hear him perform all of his original songs, including the song that inspired this one, Steel Rail Blues. So it's like one train song. And then I wrote this song later and wanted the recording to like almost embody the Gordon Lightfoot sound.
Well, if you're ever on the Amtrak and get off at Union Station in Springfield, we will welcome you back here to the Fabulous 413 anytime.
Anytime, for sure.
Well, why don't we hear one more track from the forthcoming album, Rolling Down the Line, by Kathleen Parks, who is playing tonight in Lenox at the Apple Tree Inn. This is a song called Nobody Knows here on the Fabulous 413.
I'd like to count myself lucky for having as much as I do. I've got a roof, a bed, and a family that loves me. I've got a real sweet baby. He smiles at me with his eyes, and when he calls me up at nighttime, he's my lifeline. Nobody knows. Nobody knows. And when he comes to visit, I'll sit on the porch by the sea, and I'll be well then, I promise. Oh, nobody knows. Nobody knows how beautiful and how valuable life And when the night falls down low, I'm going to take my rest, and on his chest I'll go to heaven. Nobody knows. Nobody knows how beautiful and how valuable life
That's the song Nobody Knows from the brand new album, Rolling Down the Line, from Kathleen Parks of Twisted Pine. Twisted Pine has a new album coming out on October 18th on Northampton-based record label Signature Sounds. It's called Love Your Mind.
So you have 2 albums to enjoy all of this on. But I want to ask you about vocals because, like, you went to Berklee for fiddle, correct? Mm-hmm. But, like, in the vocals that you do, and your range is, like, huge. Berklee's known for putting out, like, just hordes of really well-trained, like, jazz vocalists. Did any of that influence how you style your vocals and how you perform your vocals for yourself or in any of your projects?
Yes. So the way my approach is, well, first of all, I didn't start singing professionally until, like, my time was almost up at Berklee, and I, like, took 1 semester of vocal lessons, and then I was just like, okay, guess I'm gonna start singing lead in Twisted Pine and, like, take on that role. But my approach with vocals in general is with each song that I'm sitting with or write or receive, like, in some way, I really try to figure out, like, what is the appropriate, like, vocal styling and, like, what's the emotion behind these lyrics. And so I tried to not have any one, I guess, particular voice where, like, maybe you wouldn't always know it's me. I kind of like to be a little bit of a phantom, I guess. And so, yeah, but that definitely the influence of Berklee and, like, the many, many genres that you'll find in that school. And just, like, growing up listening to so many genres of music, it's just you start to blur the lines at some point, and you're just like, oh yeah, this feels like this and this feels like this, and I just take on the energy and, like, almost like the personality of that vocal and the treatment and, like, all of that, and have some fun with it. But thank you.
That is Kathleen Parks, who's playing tonight at the Apple Tree Inn in Lenox, tonight, August 7th. The new album, Rolling Down the Line, comes out on Friday. Twisted Pine's new album comes out in October. Thank you so much for coming in.
Yes, thank you so much. And the album release show is on Saturday.
Oh, at Club Passim in Boston, not far from Berklee.
Yep, not that far at all.
Later in this show, making the foodways of eastern Franklin County easier to navigate with Cathy Stanton of Quabbin Harvest Food Co-op and Emma Ellsworth of Mount Grace Land Trust.
But up next, Legos aren't the only way to build things on the moon, and we'll discover another, possibly easier way to get lunar living accommodations with Hampshire College's Salman Hamid.
You're listening to the Fabulous 413 on 88.5 NEPM.
The Fabulous 413 podcast is funded by the UMass 5 College Credit Union, offering co-op advantage checking with cash back on all purchases, plus secure debit card controls, all from the UMass 5 mobile banking app. Insured by NCUA, umass5.coop. NEPM's podcasts are funded by Armbrook Village Senior Living in Westfield, with support services designed to help seniors age in place, including a Compass Memory Support Neighborhood. More at armbrookvillage.com.
To boldly go where no man has gone before.
Hampshire College astronomer Dr. Salman Hamid, Mr. Universe at your Amherst kitchen table. You are going to South Africa to the Conference of the International Astronomical Union, the organizing body responsible for killing Pluto as a planet. So is that why you're there, to go and redeem Pluto?
Yes. No, this is the General Assembly, and you're right that in 2006, this was the, I should say, infamous body that demoted Pluto. But I was looking at the program. So this is the largest astronomical meeting of astronomers all around the world. People come from everywhere. And there is at least one presentation that actually brings up the question of definition of planets again. That particular abstract talked about the challenges with the definition they approved that it poses for exoplanets. Because by that definition, many of the planets around other star systems may not qualify as planets. I mean, to me, reading between the lines, so I would love to talk to the person who is presenting it, was something like, I'm not trying to recreate the controversy, but I want clarity that what is the IAU position on the definition of planets. So I think there is a little bit of rekindling of that. So
Because it was controversial, because most people were gone when they voted on that, right? And then all of a sudden this big announcement comes out that Pluto's no longer a planet.
So several thousand astronomers attend this, and on the last day when they demoted Pluto, only a few hundred were left. So, I mean, and, you may think, hey, this is an important decision. In theory, you would put it on the earlier part when you make sure that most people are there.
Yeah.
Unless there is something sinister going on.
What are you there to present?
As we have talked about, I create videos for audience in South Asia, in Pakistan as well, in Urdu. And we have a subsection of those videos directed at kids. And in fact, those kids' videos are now going to be in English as well in a few months. But right now we are presenting how we are doing those videos, what kind of things you have to take into account in particular. The challenge is most videos, astronomy and science videos for kids are in English and for Western audience made by Western media companies. But if you want to communicate astronomy, you have to talk to the local audience and with local cultural references. So in our poster that we are presenting, that is something that we are trying to emphasize how crucial it is and how we managed that challenge on how to bring in cultural humor, cultural animated figures, cultural hosts. So, we have hosts from Pakistan. How do we bring that in, and what role does it play in communicating astronomy and science?
Well, you do such a great job communicating astronomy in English to us here in the 413, but today we're talking about the moon once again, and a fascinating discovery on the moon.
We have been talking a lot on the moon, and it's partly because we are interested in it and because there are a lot of projects, there are a lot of plans for going back to the moon, including settlements on the moon perhaps by 2030, going to the moon before that with Artemis program, US-led, but also there are Chinese missions planning on going back to the moon. And one of the big factors is if you have a permanent settlement on the moon, how are you going to be protected by the temperature extremes that are there? Moon doesn't have an atmosphere. So your daytime temperature can be very hot. It could be 250 degrees Fahrenheit. So a little bit like today. No, it is hot, but not, it's in the 90s. So you can imagine if it's going to be 250 degrees, well, that's a tad bit hot.
Yes.
When
your blood would boil, right?
Water
boils at 212.
And then you have the nighttime temperatures, which can be a minus 200 degrees Fahrenheit.
Mm-hmm. Also too cold.
Sounds
like New England. The moon is New England.
And I think New England astronauts would do just fine.
I don't care winter, spring, summer, fall. I'm still rocking the shots.
You have these temperature extremes, and then because you don't have a protective atmosphere, you have also cosmic rays which come from sort of like the galaxy, but also from the sun. You have radiation from the sun that you're not protected from. You also get these micrometeoroids because there is no atmosphere. So any piece of rock, any piece of thing, that's coming in high speed.
It would have burned up in our atmosphere and become a shooting star, which happened all the time. But there, it's just coming at your head.
It's just coming to hit you. Small things won't do, but they will constantly be coming, and you won't be able to make any wishes because you won't see a shooting star.
That's so sad.
The star will just hit you.
That
would be the only wish.
I wish the star wouldn't hit me.
So there are all these challenges. So when we are thinking about humans with a permanent settlement on the moon, you have to think about how they are going to be. And we talked recently actually about Legos, the 3D construction, how they're going to make that. And so there are plans to create housing or settlements that protects, takes care of all of these things. But just recently, astronomers reanalyzed data that was taken in 2010. There's a Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter, LRO. This is a NASA mission that took a lot of images, radar images of the moon. I think it also was partly responsible for discovering water on the south pole of the moon, or water ice on the south pole of the moon. So it's really crucial. But some scientists reanalyzed the data, and it just got published in Nature Astronomy. And they knew that there were some sort of like pit-like areas on the moon. There are about 200 of those. But they weren't sure how deep they were. And they analyzed one, which is actually very close to where Apollo 11 landed in Mare Tranquillitatis. And it's the Mare Tranquillitatis pit. So it's the Sea of Tranquility pit. So they reanalyzed it, and it looks like, from an angle, because it's a radar, and they bounced it back from it, what they find is that, well, this is actually a hole that connects to potentially sort of like, basically it's a cave which connects to a network underneath of deeper tubes.
So instead of having to build housing out of Legos on the moon, which would be awesome, 3D printing Legos to build housing, they might have already built housing on the moon in these caves in the Sea of Tranquility.
Right, and the question is, well, why are they there? Well, these are lava pits. Because there was volcanism on the moon, and these mare, which people used to think that's why they were called seas, because from the Earth they look like darker areas, and at the time sort of like people thought, oh, they must be seas or oceans, but it turns out to be basalt, which is coming from lava, and that's a bed of that. And so there was volcanism few billion years ago on the moon. And so you have these lava tubes. So this particular one that they have mapped in an interesting way, it has about 300 feet wide. That's the opening. So that's actually pretty decent.
Yeah.
And then actually it has steep walls that go down, and about a couple of 100 feet actually they go down. And so that's maybe a place which can actually provide all of the protections that we are talking about from these various dangers of being on the moon.
But if I were like a giant sandworm, that's where I would live. And maybe we just haven't found them yet because they're underneath the ground on the moon.
That is true. Or maybe they are the ones who created it.
We
don't know. They have left. No.
We should send the Kwisatz Haderach up there. Muad'Dib needs to go and tame this worm.
Well, so talking about this connection to the desert, the reason why astronomers are excited about it is that these kind of lava tubes exist here on Earth. There are in Hawaii, of course, and you can visit those. Not the ones where the lava is coming out, but the ones that lava did come out.
Leave those for a couple more million years.
That's exactly right. Actually, yeah, maybe less than that. But there is recently a paper came out a few months ago, which actually talked about there is a tunnel system, lava tube system in Saudi Arabia. It's called Jirsan, which is about, I think, a few hundred miles north of Medina, one of the holy cities in Islam. And there they found a tube which is about a mile long, and it's an underground tube, and about 40 feet tall. And so you can actually go in there. And what they found is that humans were living there a few 1,000 years ago. So that's really interesting, because so you can actually see how humans might have used these type of locations, just like you and I are thinking right now, hey, actually lava tube is a good place to be, well, on the moon, because it protects from other things. But you can also imagine a few thousand years ago on the Earth, especially in warmer locations and stuff, that would actually protect them from extreme temperatures, and you can be down there and you can be protected from animals, figuring it out that you can actually have protection around it. And they found, in fact, cave art in there as well. So this is Neolithic or Stone Age inhabitants that were there. They had created some art as well. So this is a recent discovery, and that's a lava tube.
My people, the Italians, have actually worked in lava tubes for a very long time. They will go down these pipes, and then they'd roam around in these lava tubes, and they would look for this princess. But it turns out, over and over again, their princess is in another castle. So they have to go through different other lava tubes until they can beat Bowser, the king of the Koopas.
Wow, I did not know that, but now I know.
It's Super Mario Brothers.
But maybe the princess is on the moon.
Well,
as a lot of cultures think, so that's what we see over there as well. So this is an exciting discovery, but there is a caveat to it, and the caveat is that the Sea of Tranquility where the Apollo 11 also landed, that is closer to the equator. But most of the water ice is closer to the poles. Mm-hmm. And so while this is interesting, they have identified about 200 potential pits that may be lava tubes. And what you need are these lava tubes closer to the South Pole. I think or the North Pole, but most of the emphasis is going to the South Pole. Both the American-led Artemis program and Chinese-led moon program, International Lunar Research Site, program, they are both planning for going to the lunar South Pole. So that, in some sense, solves the problem of habitability. Where are they going to live if these lava tubes are available?
I still like the Lego idea.
Yeah, I know, but maybe you can still use Legos for constructing, furniture. I think you will still need that.
Everything is awesome.
An ongoing endeavor to tackle a food desert problem in Franklin County is reaching a 10-year milestone. We talk Quabbin Harvest Food Co-op with Cathy Stanton and Emma Ellsworth next.
You're listening to the Fabulous 413 on 88.5 NEPM.
Tongues.
NEPM's podcasts are funded by Armbrook Village, offering research-based arts, music, fitness, and lifelong learning programs at their assisted living and Alzheimer's care community in Westfield. armbrookvillage.com. The Fabulous 413 podcast is funded by Northeast Solar, homegrown in Hatfield, Massachusetts, and providing energy savings for their customers for over 10 years. Learn more at northeast-solar.com.
Welcome back to the Fabulous 413. We're joined by author Cathy Stanton, a self-described late-blooming scholar, a naturalized American from Canada, and an anthropologist who stumbled into the grocery business. She teaches at Tufts in Boston and lives in the North Quabbin. Her research has led her to explore the convergence of historic sites and contemporary food systems, as well as into the hands-on business of food retail, which you can read about in her new book, Food Margins: Lessons from an Unlikely Grocer. It tells the tale of the creation of the cooperative market, Quabbin Harvest in Orange.
It also tells the tale of Quabbin Harvest's relationship to the Mount Grace Land Trust. And joining us is Emma Ellsworth, the executive director of the Mount Grace Land Trust. Emma comes to Mount Grace as an avid hunter, angler, hiker, and outdoors woman. She lives at the base of Mount Tully, a Mount Grace protected property. Emma feels very passionate about protecting her backyard, quote unquote, and is grateful to be able to call it a job. Emma spent the last 20 years as a union organizer and negotiator, fighting for social justice, for working class people to have a voice on the job, and for a chance at a decent quality of life. As a member of the 7-person board at Mass Wildlife, and specifically representative of the agricultural interest, Emma is also able to have a statewide voice advocating for protection of our state's biodiversity.
Quabbin Harvest, which is the main subject of Cathy Stanton's new book, is celebrating its 10th anniversary and its partnership with Mount Grace at a party this Saturday, recently moved indoors because Hurricane Debbie
also wanted to come to the party. They're excited about your book and wanted to show up to the festivities.
And it's at Honest Weight Artisan Brewery, where the co-op got its start and makes great beer there. There'll be a combination of food, music, drink, and special guests. The legislative delegation will talk a little bit about that. But before that, there is an event at the East Longmeadow Library tonight about the book Food Margins with Cathy Stanton. Thank you both so much for joining us.
Thanks for inviting us.
No problem.
Awesome to be here.
It seems like a book about the creation of a co-op in the middle of Massachusetts might be so nuanced that it wouldn't be of wide interest. But what I love about this is that it weaves together so many different food-related stories. And one that I didn't really know a lot about but has some national prominence in the 20th century is minute tapioca.
Right.
Can you tell us about minute tapioca and how that plays into sort of the birth origin story of the Quabbin Harvest?
Sure, and also the birth or origin story of really the industrial food system, which is what Quabbin Harvest and a lot of these kinds of alternative food ventures are trying to be alternative to.
Yeah.
So when I was trying to tell this story, that is, you're right, is one of the main strands of it was kind of the coming into being of this mainstream system that now is just very taken for granted. And it's almost invisible. It's like air, we kind of just go to the supermarket and buy food, and we don't.
Anything we want is there no matter what time of
That's
year.
Right. That's right. And that just seems normal now. now, and it's actually not normal. It's really weird, and we need to remember how weird it is. So one of the ways to kind of pry that apart a little bit and show that it's not a natural thing was to trace the story of minute tapioca, which was actually founded by a woman in Boston, or invented, but then the company was founded in Orange in the 1890s. And became quite a national success story, as you said, and really industrialized cassava tapioca production and made this very cheap, convenient, kind of floofy kind of dessert that housewives particularly loved at a time when that was you were supposed to show off your kind of your talents in the kitchen. This made it easy to do that, and so they were then bought by General Foods, and General Foods was bought by Philip Morris, and Philip Morris then sold Kraft and Heinz. It's kind of lost in the brand family now, and left Orange in 1962. And so that factory stood empty for quite a while, and is now a business incubator, and lots of little businesses are there, and that's where our co-op incubated, as you mentioned. So, and also where Honest Weight Brewery is, where we'll have this party. So, and just to clarify, Monty, the co-op started in 2009, so we're actually 15 years old. The 10th anniversary is of our moving to our storefront location, which we did in 2014 when Mount Grace bought that building to serve as our home.
Well, that's a perfect segue for us. Emma Ellsworth is the executive director of Mount Grace, and we were mentioning Tully Lake and Mount Tully and the places that a land trust preserves. What does a land trust have to do with a grocery store?
That is an awesome question. I get asked that more frequently than you would think. So we do a lot of working land protection, including farmland protection. And what became very, very clear is that we could protect the farm, we could protect the soils and the place to grow food, but it really didn't make a huge difference if we weren't playing a role in protecting farm viability. So if farmers don't have a place to sell their food and a way to make a living, then we don't end up with local food production. So there's farmers markets. Farmers markets are beautiful and spectacular. They're really labor intensive. There's big grocery stores. But if you're a small family farm with maybe 10 acres, producing enough food to get into a big grocery store is prohibitive. So it was really kind of a perfect partnership when we started talking with a food co-op to say, hey, can we have a market for the person who's got 20 bushels of carrots, who's putting out 10 dozen eggs a week? So it's made a tremendous difference for our local farms.
Emma Ellsworth is the executive director of Mount Grace Land Trust. Are there other endeavors that Mount Grace has taken on since Quabbin Harvest that are like this, that are not strictly farmland or land preservation?
Has this set sort of a precedent or like a blueprint for doing it in other locations?
Sure. We have not done another co-op market. This was probably our one and only. But again, we're always sort of scratching the surface of farm viability. So we think a lot about farm housing and farms.
Interesting.
So how do we attach the farmhouse to the land? And especially in this moment where housing costs are so astronomical, and we're seeing an unprecedented number of farms change hands. And so how do you make that farmland and the farmhouse affordable to someone who's getting ready to make their living selling rutabagas?
Right.
So that's something that we take on all the time. We protected 40,000 acres in our 23-town region of North Quabbin. So no small endeavor.
And one of the things you've also protected is people coming together to form a community market, Quabbin Harvest. And coming up, we'll talk more about the book Food Margins, Lessons from an Unlikely Grocer from author Cathy Stanton, who has an event at the East Longmeadow Library tonight about the book, but will be at Quabbin Harvest actually at Abandoned Building. Not Abandoned Building.
Honest Weight
Brewery. All the breweries. This Saturday due to Debbie Downer, the hurricane.
You're listening to the Fabulous 413 on 88.5 NAPM. Don't call her that.
That's the hurricane's name. I'll call her Debbie Downer if I want. Welcome back to the Fabulous 413. I'm Monty Belmonte.
And I'm Clee Smith. Emma Ellsworth is the executive director of the Mount Grace Land Trust, and author, educator, and unlikely grocer Cathy Stanton is also here, both of them celebrating the 10-year collaboration between their two organizations to bring us the Quabbin Harvest Food Co-op. And in that 10 years, like the interesting thing about your book about this, which is called Food Margins, Lessons from an Unlikely Grocer, that I found is that the co-op started as basically a CSA. And having seen the origins of River Valley Co-op being in the Valley for at least that long, like that was not the approach that they took at all. Can you talk about the evolution of seeing where the foodways were in Orange through that CSA and trying to evolve them into something that applied to more of the population?
Yeah, sure. So it's, as I said, the buying club started in 2009 as a seasonal produce buying club, and basically a way to aggregate things from local farmers so that the people who founded the co-op didn't have to drive around from farm stand to farm stand looking for their rutabagas. And so that started actually under a pop-up tent in the parking lot of the Orange Innovation Center. I was just telling Emma that the share price has not increased since 2009. It's still our signature. You can buy a share. It's not really like a CSA where you buy in for the whole season. It's more that you can go week by week and you can order, and it's sort of different every week. So that's still happening. But then they decided they would try to go maybe over the winter and make it not just a seasonal thing. And then they opened a very tiny little store that was 3 days a week, run by volunteers. And then they had to have cooling equipment, and then they had to sell more stuff to pay for the cooling equipment and the electricity. And this growth cycle started. Like if they're going to keep this going, it needed to keep growing. And then at a certain point, this tiny little store wasn't able to, it was sort of hidden in the center of the OIC, and it wasn't able to recoup enough in sales to keep them going. And that's when they decided that it needed to really ramp up and be a more 6-day-a-week brick-and-mortar business with paid staff, which is a whole other magnitude of running a business. It really kind of catapulted them into a much different kind of bracket in terms of trying to be a food retail business.
And you, Cathy, kind of set the tone for when you see that the books aren't panning out, but that this seems to be something still important, going out and saying, we're going to make $6,000 a week. Here's how we think we can do it. A lot of the players that we've talked to many times on the show, or have connected with at least, including Dean's Beans, are a major player in the story of Quabbin Harvest and the story of your book right before the pandemic hits, which in some ways saved the co-op. Dean Sycon helped to reach out to this other organization with a similar mission in the same town. Can you talk about collaborating with organizations like Dean's Beans, like Squash, now Marty's Local?
Sure, exactly. And with Mount Grace. And right. I was thinking kind of the thread that runs through this is, I will just say one of my main pieces of learning about this is that it's really, really hard to make money selling food. It's a terrible way to make money. And especially doing it at a small scale in a low density kind of neighborhood. And so to do that, to keep going, you really do need lots of partnerships and lots of other businesses and friends who understand that there's something beyond just kind of making money selling food, that there's bringing good quality food into the community and nurturing our neighbors and all of those things. So, so Dean's Beans has been a really important partner from the beginning. It was actually the first non-local produce product that people wanted to have in that little store. They wanted to be able to source Dean's Beans. And in fact, the part of our origin story is that two of the founders encountered each other in the Isle of Hannaford, which had recently stopped carrying Dean's Beans when it was bought by a giant, multinational conglomerate, and sort of bonded over the fact that they couldn't get these beans that were roasted in Orange anywhere in Orange any longer. And so that was part of that. So, and Dean's, as you probably know, Dean has just retired and has sold his business to his workers. So it is now the second food co-op in Orange, the second cooperative business.
Yeah, worker-owned co-op, and you're food co-op.
Right. Yeah. Can I also talk about, there was an amazing community meeting in the co-op right before the pandemic that there was, I don't know, Cathy would probably know the exact number, but there was a whole lot more than 50, maybe less than 100 people packed into the co-op. And we were really grappling with, could we keep the store open? Could we afford to keep the store open? And I get goosebumps when I think about that night, because it was really a community coming together saying, this isn't just about having access to this food. This is about us supporting one another and saying we need this. Like, we need local food. We need everyone to have access to it, whether they can afford a premium, whether they can't. So it was electrifying. And I think it's really changed people's relationship to the store.
That actually ties right into a question I was going to have for you, Emma, about so you mentioned food, like farmers markets and how difficult they are, but how does your organization's connection to the co-op differ from its connection to those farmers markets? How different is the interaction between the people and the food where your organization is concerned?
And your organization is the Mount Grace Land Trust.
Right.
Yeah.
So, we have supported the creation of farmers markets, and we've tried to use our staff to sort of enable facilitating meetings and people thinking about how you make farmers markets happen and where they should be. But really, primarily, the co-op is our deep dive into the food system. But Mount Grace has really approached land conservation from a social justice approach. Our area of Massachusetts is what I would call economically disadvantaged. And for a lot of folks in our community, land is their primary asset. So when they're protecting land, they're really protecting their ability to retire with dignity, to pass on something to their kids. That's it. And land is relatively affordable, which also makes it really susceptible to a lot of development pressure. So our land protection feels super urgent, particularly right now. And I think just like we're asking the questions of who gets to eat, like a fresh, ripe, amazing tomato, right out of a neighboring field, we're also asking the question of who gets to own land, who gets to farm, who gets to have all the health benefits of a walk in the woods or by a river. Having access to nature literally extends our lives. And that should be something we all get.
That is Emma Ellsworth, who's the executive director of the Mount Grace Land Trust. Mount Grace and Quabbin Harvest, the food co-op, are celebrating 10 years of partnership together this Saturday at Honest Weight and the Orange Innovation Center. Congressman Jim McGovern will be there. We'll talk about that with him tomorrow on the show. Senator Joe Comerford will be there, Representative Susanna Whips, as well as the Director of Rural Affairs, former Senator Ann Goby. How long will this partnership between Mount Grace and the Quabbin Harvest last? Is this the end of a beautiful relationship? Is it the middle of a beautiful relationship?
Well, Mount Grace talks in timelines of perpetuity, which is forever. So I don't think Quabbin Harvest can get rid of us.
Okay, good.
Because you're not going to break up with them.
And I don't think they want to break up with you.
Definitely.
We read about all the nitty-gritty details about how hard it was to keep this thing going in this book by Cathy Stanton called Food Margins, Lessons from an Unlikely Grocer.
Indeed. And to get back to something that Emma, you guys are segueing into my question so well. It's beautiful. But there's a moment in your book, Cathy, where you are going into the co-op for the first time and seeing things on the shelves, and you're like, these are things that I can't get here, but this is not necessarily what the community needs. Can you talk about shifting the focus of the co-op towards what the community actually wanted and needed?
Yeah, I describe it as being like a wee little tiny Whole Foods, which was not exactly what we needed in the North Quabbin region, which has a sort of I talk about sort of scrappy, kind of a blue-collar, working-class kind of sensibility overall. It's, these are like mill towns and little...
I think you call it a blue island in a red island in a blue state in the book, which I love.
Exactly. Yes, exactly. Which a lot of co-ops do tend to be. But this has been a real work in progress, and it's like continually tinkering to sort of see what will people respond to. We've just added fresh fish from the Boston Food Market through our partnership with Marty's Local, which gets it through Wolf's Fish in Boston, and that's a really popular item. So we're continually tinkering with it, but it is more how to be sort of a general grocery store that people can do a lot of their shopping at, and privileging or emphasizing local foods, which is really our kind of the thing we want to center it around. And that mix has evolved over time and seems to work at this point.
Do you think your freezer woes will ever end?
There's a lot of freezer woes written about in the book.
We just added some new equipment, and it's really super great, except it's putting out more heat into the store. And so we were overheating in these heat waves, and so now we're having to find ways to dump all the new heat. So no, I don't think they will.
Hence the subtitle of the book, Unlikely Grocer, Cathy Stanton, who, as we mentioned, teaches at Tufts and is an anthropologist and many other things.
The irony that freezers put out so much heat to keep things cold, yes.
The book really, really is fascinating. It talks about the market basket situation between the Arties that many people in Massachusetts may remember. It talks about Castle Rock, the Stephen King show, coming in there and the impact that had. It brought up a lot of interesting things to me about some flaws in the HIP program, which we've talked a lot about on this show, the Healthy Incentives Program. It's a fascinating read. Food Margins, Lessons from an Unlikely Grocer by Cathy Stanton, who has been joining us.
And a really fun read for how much information is in there. Like, you would think something like this would be a little staid, but, like, your prosody is very, very fun to get through.
We've also been joined by Emma Ellsworth, the executive director of the Mount Grace Land Trust, who is in perpetuity in relationship with the Quabbin Harvest. There is an event happening this Saturday at Honest Weight. The Orange Innovation Center moved from the location of the co-op right now with Congressman McGovern and more. Thank you both so much for joining us.
Thank you both.
And don't forget,
Thank you for
tonight,
having us.
Cathy Stanton at East Longmeadow Library.
Yes. And then on Thursday, we will be talking with Jim McGovern, of course, possibly about this event.
Definitely.
And we're headed to the Berkshires for a magical combination of tradition and technique, talking with the folks from Berkshire Cider and Hancock Shaker Village about their upcoming cider makers dinner. I'm Khalees Smith.
I'm Monty Belmonte.
We'll talk to you tomorrow on the Fabulous 413.
It cannot be too far before